My name is Sarah, and from a young age, I learned a bitter lesson. In my family, love was never distributed equally. My older brother Daniel was always the golden child in my parents' eyes. He wasn't just praised on every occasion, he was given the best of everything our family had to offer. And me? I was the shadow in the background, the one they remembered only when chores needed doing or when they wanted to compare someone to Daniel to boost his praise even more. I still remember that Christmas when I was 7. Daniel tore open the biggest box under the tree and screamed with joy when he saw the newest gaming console. My parents beamed, and my mom even pulled out her phone to record this special moment. I sat quietly, waiting for my turn, trying not to get my hopes up too much. My gift? A gray t-shirt from a clearance rack, tag still on, $3.99, with the logo of some plumbing company on it. Too big, too ugly, and way too obvious that no one had bothered to choose it for me. My mom just smiled and said, "Sweetie, you should learn to be content. Daniel's older. He needs more important things." I forced a smile, then sat in the corner watching Daniel play his new game. The screen's glow lighting up his thrilled face, while I blinked back the sting in my eyes. Holidays never got better. For Daniel's 16th birthday, they threw a huge outdoor party. There was a live band, it was held at a lakeside park, and they gave him a brand new Ford with a big red bow on the hood. Practically the whole neighborhood showed up. For me, I got to invite 2 friends over for frozen pizza at home, sitting under the weak yellow light in the living room. My birthday gift? A cheap notebook and a ballpoint pen. Not even a cute one, just the kind people hand out for free at job fairs. "You're practical," my dad said. "You don't need anything fancy." But Daniel got all the fancy things, even though he never had to ask. When he went to college, my parents covered his full tuition and gave him monthly spending money. As for me, I got a stack of student loan applications and a long lecture about growing up and being independent. No one asked if I was okay, if I had enough to eat, or if I was exhausted from working late-night shifts. I used to believe that if I just worked harder, things would change, but by the time I graduated, that last bit of hope had shattered. Daniel was welcomed home with a big backyard celebration, confetti poppers, a 3-tiered cake, cheers from relatives. My parents gave him a starter home in the northern suburbs as a reward for all his hard work. Me? I walked into our small dining room, where only my parents sat, along with a takeout box of fast food. They handed me a plain white envelope. I hoped it might be a small check to help cover my remaining tuition debt, but inside was a $2 scratch-off lottery ticket. "Just for fun," my mom said cheerfully, like it was the cutest little joke. "Maybe you'll hit it big?" I looked up at them. Neither of them looked guilty or even awkward. My dad shrugged. "You know how it is. All our money went into Daniel's house." I smiled. A tired, hollow smile. I folded the ticket, tucked it into the pocket of my worn coat, and nodded. But inside, I wasn't angry. I was empty. Turns out, I was never part of the real plan in my family. And now, I was beginning to understand that if I wanted a place in this world, I'd have to make it myself, without expecting anyone to hand it to me. After that silent graduation dinner, I packed everything I owned, some old clothes, a beat-up laptop, and a chipped red suitcase, and left the house I'd never truly felt welcome in. I rented a tiny studio apartment in downtown Cincinnati, where car horns at midnight and the orange glow of streetlights replaced the cold silence of my parents' home. My apartment was barely big enough for a single bed, a small desk, and a noisy electric stove that buzzed every time I turned it on. The walls were stained off-white, the pipes leaked when it got cold, and arguments from the neighbors passed through paper-thin walls. But at least it was mine. No one belittled me. No one compared me to Daniel. No one told me I should be grateful for discount clothes during the holidays. I worked 2 jobs to survive. During the day, I was a marketing assistant at a small billboard company. At night, I worked at a bakery near the market, serving customers, wiping tables, and taking out the trash until nearly midnight. In those first weeks, I'd come home with aching feet, hands smelling like flour and fryer grease. But I felt lighter than I ever had back home. My family rarely texted, never called to ask how I was doing. In the family group chat, where I was still technically included, everything still revolved around Daniel. My mom would send photos of him posing with his new car or smiling in their newly remodeled living room for the third time. My dad sent videos of Daniel and his girlfriend vacationing in Florida with the caption, "The kid deserves it all." I was never part of those conversations. Even when I dropped in a simple check-in, "How's everyone doing?" the replies were just a few half-hearted emojis. Sometimes, I wondered if I disappeared. Would anyone even notice? The $2 lottery ticket my mom gave me on graduation night still sat in the drawer next to the kitchen, buried under a few coins, a dried-out pen, and an overdue electric bill. I never bothered to scratch it. To me, it was a bitter reminder that in my parents' eyes, that's all I was worth. A vague chance instead of a real investment. Every night I'd pass that drawer. Sometimes I'd run my fingers over the wrinkled edge of the ticket, then shut it again. I told myself I was used to being overlooked, that I didn't need anyone's approval. But sometimes, in those quietest hours, I'd still hear my mother's voice echoing in my mind. Daniel needs more. Like a splinter under my skin, I carried it with me even in sleep. Then one Friday evening, I was invited to a small party hosted by a coworker. While I sat quietly at the dessert table, a girl named Marissa, from the creative team, started chatting with me. After a while talking about work, she tilted her head, smiled, and asked, "Sarah, how come I never hear you talk about your family?" I hesitated, then just said, "Maybe because they never really saw me as part of it." Marissa didn't pry. She just nodded, like she understood more than anyone ever had. That feeling of being heard without being judged felt like a tiny crack opening somewhere deep inside. That night, when I got home, I opened the drawer. For the first time in months, I picked up the ticket and stared at the numbers under the thin silver coating. My heart slowed. I didn't know why, but something nudged me. Not because I wanted to be rich, but because I was tired of believing I had no worth. I laid the ticket on the table, grabbed my phone, and looked up how to check it on the state's lottery website. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new message from the family group chat. I opened it. It was a photo Daniel had just posted. He stood in front of a house, arm around his girlfriend, and behind them was a wooden sign that read, "Playground for our firstborn, coming soon." Underneath were messages from my parents. "So proud. Daniel's going to be a dad. Couldn't be happier." Not a single word from me. I gave a small laugh. But this time, it wasn't bitter. I set my phone down, uncapped the pen, and gently scratched off the silver layer. No matter what the outcome was, I was ready for change. I could barely breathe as the numbers revealed themselves. My heart pounded so hard I had to place a hand over my chest to make sure I was still conscious. I blinked, repeating each number under my breath, afraid I was reading them wrong. 8, 14, 27, 33, 42, 56. I looked at my phone screen, where the Ohio Lottery website flashed. "Congratulations! You've won the jackpot, $134 million. I dropped the pen and stared at the ticket like it had just burst into flame in front of me. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a dream. I had really won. The whole apartment seemed to hold its breath with me. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up and down like people do on TV. I just sat there, silent, hands trembling, mind spinning with a single question. Now what? I didn't call anyone. There wasn't a single person in my life I felt safe sharing this with. My family? They wouldn't ask how I felt. They'd only ask how much I planned to share. That same night, I sat down at my laptop and typed into the search bar, "What to do when you win the lottery." Hundreds of results came up, but I chose one from a well-known financial site. The first tip it emphasized: don't tell anyone. Find a trustworthy financial advisor. I wrote down a few of the top-rated names in the city. After a lot of thought, I chose someone named Carol Whitman, a financial expert with over 20 years of experience, whose office was on the 19th floor of a sleek glass building in downtown Cincinnati. I was so nervous before that first meeting, I almost didn't go. I wore my simplest dress, tied my hair back neatly, and arrived 15 minutes early. Carol's office smelled like peppermint tea and soft jazz music played in the background. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her bright brown eyes looking like they'd seen hundreds of stories just like mine before. "This isn't something that happens every day," Carol said after I told her everything in one breath. "But it's not magic either. We're going to turn this into a long-term opportunity, not a one-time stroke of luck." For 3 hours, she helped me create a detailed plan. I wouldn't claim the prize under my real name. We'd set up a limited liability company, an LLC, to receive the funds. That way, my identity would stay completely private. Carol called in a tax attorney, then an investment specialist. The team worked together like they were the only people in the world I could trust. Maybe they really were. After submitting all the paperwork and completing the process, I received my first check. $85 million after taxes, transferred into a new account under the company's name. I couldn't believe I was holding a number that used to exist only in my dreams. I once ate instant noodles for 3 straight months just to save money for the electric bill. Now, I could buy the entire building I lived in. But I didn't. I started with small steps. Paid off my student loans, cleared all my credit card balances, moved out of my old apartment and into a small, quiet house in the suburbs, where the maple trees turned a brilliant red every fall. No mansion, no sports car. I bought a gray hybrid Lexus, sleek, classy, but low profile. I kept my daytime marketing job, at least for the first few weeks. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed time to get used to this new version of myself, a Sarah who wasn't constantly backed into a corner. The only job I quit right away was the evening shift at the bakery. I wrote a handwritten thank you letter to the owner, along with a small check to help expand the cake display. It was the kindest goodbye I'd ever written. What surprised me most wasn't the feeling of freedom, it was the peace. Every morning I brewed coffee in a sunlit kitchen and looked out over the backyard where the sparrows chirped. I'd sit down, open a book, no longer worrying about payment deadlines or my mom's passive-aggressive calls. That lottery ticket now hangs in a small glass frame next to my desk, not as a brag, but as a reminder that sometimes the only thing we need is a chance, even if it comes from the most unexpected place. And that, for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else to give me worth. I found it in my own hands. Life after that felt like a dream, but the kind you protect, quietly, like a secret you don't want to wake from. I officially left the marketing job after 3 months. On my last day, I brought 2 boxes of cinnamon waffles and a small bouquet of lavender to thank everyone. I told them I'd been offered a freelance opportunity at a creative agency in Seattle. No one questioned it. I had always worked hard, always dreamed bigger. A week later, I moved to Edgewood, a quiet suburb in southern Ohio. I bought a 2-story modern farmhouse with a wide backyard, an open kitchen with granite island and tall windows that welcomed the morning sun. A few neighbors joked I must have struck it big with unicorn stock. I just smiled faintly and said I freelance remotely for a foreign company. Vague enough that no one asked more. The car I picked was a pearl-white Tesla, smooth and silent, like my new life. I registered it under the company's name with a personalized plate that simply read, SK27. No one but me knew it stood for Sarah King, my name and my birth date. Every morning I brewed coffee with my new machine, stood on the balcony and looked at the tree-lined driveway, feeling light. I started writing, not for money, but because I wanted to. I wrote children's stories, something I'd dreamed of doing for years but was always told was impractical. Carol helped me invest in a small independent publishing house. On weekends, I attended watercolor classes at a nearby studio. It was the first time I'd truly lived freely. No rigid schedules, no comparisons. No, if Daniel could do it, why can't you? I stayed completely off social media. No photos, no updates. But rumors have a way of slipping through. It all started with Chloe, a college classmate who once shared a dorm with me. One afternoon, I got a message from her. "Sarah, did you just buy a house in Edgewood? I swear I saw your photo in the neighborhood group and freaked out." I nearly dropped my phone. In this neighborhood, residents often shared photos of new standouts. This time, it was my Tesla parked beside a mailbox labeled S. King with the caption, "What does our new neighbor do to be this rich? Free Starbucks to whoever guesses right." I rushed to remove my name from the mailbox and re-registered everything under the company. But it was too late. Chloe didn't say anything else, but a week later, I saw 3 missed calls from my mom. I didn't call back. 2 days later, I got a text from my cousin Lucas. "So you really moved to Edgewood? Everyone's talking. Your mom thinks you came into some money. They even asked if I knew anything." My heart sank. After years of being forgotten, it took just a photo of a car and a new house for them to suddenly remember I existed. I didn't reply to Lucas, but I knew the thing I'd feared most had finally happened. I couldn't stay hidden forever. Rumors spread like wind, and in my family, even a small breeze was enough to spark wild expectations. The next morning, while watering the plants, I saw a familiar black SUV slowly drive past and stop right in front of my gate. My heart thudded. The window rolled down, and I saw Daniel, my brother, behind the wheel. Sitting next to him was my mom, hair perfectly curled, eyes full of curiosity she didn't bother to hide. I ducked behind a maple tree, my heart racing. They stared at my house for a while, then Daniel turned to Mom and said something. I couldn't hear it, but I could guess. It's probably her. The car drove off, but the dust from its tires lingered in my mind like a warning. That night, I sat in the living room, warm yellow light falling across the wooden floor, but I didn't feel comforted like usual. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "We need to talk. We'll come visit you soon." I locked the screen. No response. I had earned my freedom. But now, the question was, what would I do to protect it? My mom's texts kept coming all week, sometimes gentle. "Sweetheart, I just want to see you. I miss you." Sometimes casual. "We're making your favorite stew this Sunday. Want to join for dinner?" And sometimes sweet in that forced, sugary way. Family is forever, Sarah. No matter where you live or what you do, you'll always be part of us. I didn't reply to any of them. But I didn't block the number either. I wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. Finally, after 2 weeks of silence, Daniel called me directly. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment, then picked up. "Sarah," he began, sounding overly cheerful. "Listen, Mom's really upset you've been avoiding us. Seriously, she cried all night yesterday." He paused, then shifted tone, like he was getting to the real reason. "So, me and Haley, we're getting married, did you hear? We're having the ceremony this coming spring. Mom and Dad are thrilled." I leaned back into the sofa, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Yeah, I heard." I replied briefly. "So, why don't you come home for dinner this Sunday? The whole family'll be there. Just come for fun. We're still family, right?" I stayed silent for a moment, then agreed. Part of me wanted to know what they really wanted. Another part wanted to remind myself why I had walked away in the first place. Sunday night, I drove to the old house, the one I used to believe would one day love me back if I just tried hard enough. Same white picket fence, same stone walkway, same old swing still dangling under the porch. But I wasn't the girl who stood there waiting for praise anymore. Mom opened the door and hugged me just a little too tightly. "You're so skinny," she said, then walked straight to the kitchen without waiting for a reply. Dad gave a nod, like I was a guest. Daniel patted me hard on the back like we were long-lost friends reunited after vacation. Dinner went exactly how I expected. Conversation entirely about Daniel and Haley. Mom showed off the dress they'd picked. Dad talked about how they'd decorate the backyard for the wedding. I just sat there, smiled faintly, picked at my food, and counted the minutes until the performance ended. As dessert arrived, Mom tapped her spoon gently against her glass, the soft clink ringing out like a signal. "I have something to say," she began, eyes fixed on me. "Daniel and Haley are really excited for the wedding, but, putting together a proper ceremony and expanding the house so they can move in, it's going to cost quite a bit." I set my glass down. My hand was steady. I was ready. "And since you're doing so well," Mom continued, her voice sliding into sugar-coated sweetness, "the family thought, maybe, if you could help just a little, around $100,000 to build a new garage and help with some wedding expenses." Dad nodded, as if it had already been settled. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling expectantly. "Sarah," he said, "I know you get it. We're family, blood. Helping each other when it matters should be a given." I looked at them all, my eyes no longer holding any hope, just a quiet calm. The kind I had fought so hard to earn. "Family?" I repeated, my voice steady. "Where was family when I was in college, when I worked 2 jobs and lived off instant noodles for a month? Where were you then?" No one answered. "What was it Mom said to me back then?" I tilted my head and looked at her. "Oh, right. No one's stopping you from working harder." Well, now I have. I worked harder, but not to pay for the things you dismissed. No one smiled, no one argued. I stood up, picked up my purse, and looked at them one last time. "I used to hope you'd see me. I used to hope to be part of this family, but not anymore. And if you really want to expand your garage," I turned to Daniel and smiled, "then no one's stopping you from working harder." I walked out the door, feeling like an old, creaky door in my heart had quietly, firmly closed. And this time, I didn't look back. That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast, just the soft hum of the tires against the road and the gentle wind slipping through the cracked window. In the rearview mirror, the glow of my old house blurred like a fading memory. But I knew I hadn't just left that place physically, I'd left it in spirit, too. When I got home, I sank onto the living room couch, slipped off my heels, and let out a long, deep breath. The relief didn't come all at once. Instead, there was a quiet sadness, like I had just said goodbye to something that once meant everything, even if it had hurt me so many times. But this time was different. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't a child trying to earn love through good behavior. The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop, messages from Mom. "What did you mean by that? I never treated you any differently. Family always comes first. You really hurt me, Sarah." Then from Daniel, "I don't even know who you are anymore. We just needed a little help and you acted like a stranger." I dropped the phone into a drawer and locked it. I'd heard these lines all my life. The only difference now was I didn't believe them anymore. I started my new days on my own terms. No rigid schedule, no urge to prove anything. Each morning I got up early, brewed coffee, and sat on the porch watching the sunlight spill across the front lawn. I wrote more, read more, even started learning to play the ukulele. Something I had dreamed of in high school but never got encouragement to pursue. I invested in a few small projects with Carol's guidance, my financial advisor who had become more like a close friend. We talked every week, not just about money but about life, balance, self-worth, and real freedom. My house grew warmer with time. I planted more lavender along the fence, added a small swing in the backyard, and built a tall bookshelf in the living room. Every item I chose, every corner I decorated, felt like a declaration. I was no longer living inside someone else's mold. One late fall afternoon, as I was watering the garden, I heard the doorbell ring. On the front step was a white envelope with no name. I opened it. Inside was an old family photo, me, Daniel, Mom, and Dad, taken on a summer trip to Lake Erie. On the back was one line: No matter where you are, home is still home. I didn't smile. I didn't feel sad. I just quietly folded the photo and placed it in the drawer next to the fireplace. I didn't rip it. Didn't throw it away. I just didn't belong there anymore. A week later, I received an invitation to an art exhibition in Columbus. One of my children's short stories had been illustrated and displayed in the new authors section. I drove there alone, with soft jazz playing in the car and a light buzz of excitement in my chest. No one clapped when I entered the gallery. No one took pictures of me next to the display. But I felt whole, more complete than I ever did standing beside Daniel, soaking up empty praise. After the exhibit, I sat alone in a small cafe down the street, jotting down new ideas in my leather notebook. A little girl at the next table watched me for a while, then walked over. "Are you the one who wrote Little Moon?" she asked, eyes bright. I nodded and smiled. "I really love that story. You're a great writer." That sentence, from a complete stranger, warmed my heart in a way I had waited my whole life to feel from the people closest to me. I thanked her and returned to my table, my chest filled with quiet joy. I had nothing left to prove, no one left to impress. I had stepped out of the invisible cage called family duty, and for the first time in my life I was living, truly living, with the clear belief that I was worthy of good things. Not because anyone said so, but because I had found that worth within myself, through the smallest things. The months that followed passed like a cool breeze on a sweltering summer day. My new life wasn't flashy or loud, but it was full of things I never dared to dream of when I lived under that old roof. I invested in a few edtech startups Carol introduced me to, bought a small cabin in Vermont for long retreats, and, every so often, I treated myself to a trip, not to escape but to explore. I had mornings sipping coffee by the beach in Santa Barbara, afternoons reading beneath old oak trees in Oregon, and evenings watching fireworks from a vintage hotel balcony in Savannah. No more financial stress, no more tightrope walking around icy glances or passive digs. With each passing day, I felt closer to the woman I had always hidden deep inside. I began writing more regularly. Children's stories, filled with imagination, small but brave characters, dreams dismissed by others but never truly extinguished. My debut book was published by a small press in Chicago, and strangely, I felt no urge to show it off to anyone in my family. For the first time, success wasn't tied to outside approval. I stopped checking messages from Mom or Daniel. Carol helped me move all personal contact to private channels. The people who really cared about me were already in my life. New friends, a few sincere professional relationships, and most importantly, one Saturday afternoon, as I waited for my order at my favorite organic bakery downtown, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Sarah?" I turned. It was Daniel. He wore a gray plaid shirt, his hair a little messy, like he had just stepped out of the car. He didn't look much different from the last time we met, except now his eyes had lost their old confidence. Instead, they carried a trace of weariness, a hint of bitterness. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said with a weak smile. "You live around here?" I nodded, polite but distant. "Yeah, close by. You?" Daniel shrugged. "Just picking up pastries for Haley. She's pregnant with our second." He paused. "Mom still talks about you all the time." I said nothing. Silence stretched for a few seconds. Then Daniel looked at me directly, voice quieter. "You know, sometimes I think this world just isn't fair." I tilted my head, my gaze calm, and replied clearly, "I agree. Life isn't fair. But I learned how to make it fair for myself." Daniel curled his lips like he wanted to say something but stayed quiet. Maybe he understood that I wasn't the same little sister who once sat quietly at the dinner table, smiling through pain. I didn't need them to know I was worthy. His silence said it all. He knew I had outgrown the box they tried to keep me in. A bakery employee called my name and handed me the warm bag. I nodded in thanks, turned to Daniel. I really do wish you the best. I mean that. I walked away without looking back. Under the soft golden sun stretching across the sidewalk, I moved slowly, steadily. I didn't need to win. I just needed to live. That night, I sat on my porch, a mug of chamomile tea in hand, eyes lifted to a sky sprinkled with stars. The wind rustled the lavender by the fence. I thought of the years that had passed, all the times I was forgotten, compared, made to feel like the extra piece. I once believed I was just a flawed version of something better, something Daniel represented, but now I knew the truth. I wasn't a copy of anyone. I was Sarah, someone who had been overlooked, dismissed, but also someone who rose and rebuilt a life from the pieces. Is life unfair? Maybe. But I made it fair, with my own hands and my own belief. And the freedom I have now, no one can take that away. From a girl underestimated by her own family, Sarah had moved beyond old wounds to build a life of freedom and value with her own two hands. She no longer sought validation from those who once hurt her, but instead learned to love herself and live in alignment with what she believed in. Sarah's story reminds us, no one has the right to define your worth, except you. Sometimes, walking away from toxic relationships is the very first step toward finding true happiness. What do you think of Sarah's journey? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow our channel for more powerful and inspiring stories about family and self-worth. I started preparing for my baby shower at the beginning of April, when I was already huge at 33 weeks pregnant. My little house in the suburbs of Portland, once quiet, was now filled with cardboard boxes, pastel balloons, and cloud-themed invitations. I didn't hire a planner, no one offered to help. I handled everything myself. Every dish, every ribbon, every soft track I picked to play as the guests arrived. I ordered a vanilla cake with lavender buttercream from my favorite bakery. Even though I didn't have much of a budget, I still wanted everything to feel right. I chose a light mousse filling, thinking it would be easier for everyone to eat, especially my grandma, who always complained that sweets hurt her teeth. I went grocery shopping early Saturday morning, even though my back ached and my ankles had started to swell. I carried the bags home, arranged everything on the kitchen counter, then sat down and caught my breath in silence. No one asked if I needed anything. My mom said she was working overtime at the school library, and my brother Caleb was getting in the right headspace for his high school spring formal. Still, I kept going. I tidied up the living room, wiped down every window frame, and cleared out all the leftover moving boxes from the corners. I washed the ivory tablecloths and carefully pressed each crease flat. Deep down, I had one small hope. A peaceful afternoon. A little warmth and a sense of being seen, not as someone who'd made a mistake and got pregnant, like Mom once said, but as someone about to become a mother, someone trying to do the right thing for the baby girl growing inside her. I made a playlist of soft acoustic songs. It took me nearly 2 hours to put it together. I wanted the atmosphere to be gentle, the kind where people could sit and talk, or listen to the quiet hum of a mom-to-be. I imagined my daughter growing up in that kind of calm. The night before the party, I stayed up until nearly midnight hanging tissue garlands around the doorframe, strand by strand, using craft store glue. No one held the ladder while I stretched to tie them up high. I just hoped I wouldn't slip. At that point, I still had hope. I believed that maybe, just this once, they would show up, really show up, for me. My mom used to say everything's going to be okay, and I held on to that the way I held the handrail each morning when I came down the stairs. I told myself maybe once they saw all I'd done, they'd smile, hug me, and tell me I did great. I didn't need big words or expensive gifts. I just needed them to see me as part of this family, not the shadow left behind every time it was Caleb's turn. That morning, I walked into the living room and looked around one last time before the guests arrived. The early spring light filtered through the curtains, casting a glow on the sign I'd cut and glued by hand. Welcome, baby Emma. Beneath it was a small table with pastries, fruit, and a pot of chamomile tea I'd already brewed. I gently placed my hand on my belly, where my baby had just kicked hard, like she was excited too. I wasn't expecting a picture-perfect party out of a magazine. I just hoped that for a fleeting moment, I could be the main character in my own story. No one interrupting, no one stealing the spotlight. But I was wrong. People started arriving around 1 p.m. First came Aunt Margaret, carrying a small basket full of embroidered handkerchiefs and a few worn children's books she said she used to read to me. Then my college friend Jenny, 6 months pregnant, walked in with a warm smile and a silver-wrapped gift box. At first, everything was just as I'd hoped. Soft wishes, gentle laughter, genuine hugs. I thought, maybe this time it'll be different. I started to relax. I even laughed out loud when a 3-year-old, Laura's son, reached up and tapped a dangling balloon with wonder. The atmosphere was simple but caring, and I truly believed this was my day. Until my mother tapped her fork against a glass. A sharp ting cut through the room, and everyone fell silent. She stood there in a teal dress, wearing that familiar smile, the one she always had before announcing something big. My dad stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back like a seal of support. "Before we cut the cake," my mother said in an oddly sweet voice, "we have some exciting news to share." I froze. My heart started pounding, like my body already knew what was coming. The kitchen door swung open and Caleb walked out, holding up a bright red envelope. "I got into Princeton," he shouted, his face glowing. The room erupted. Someone clapped. Aunt Margaret gasped, "Oh my goodness, how wonderful!" One of my mom's friends even got up and hugged Caleb like she'd raised him herself. I looked around. No one was looking at me anymore. Or at the lavender cake. They all surrounded Caleb, my 17-year-old brother who had never done the dishes or made his bed, and whose tutoring bills I'd paid for the past 2 years. The cake I ordered, with "Welcome Sweet Emma" written on top, was pushed aside to make room for the pizza someone had just ordered. Someone turned on music. Loud, bouncy hip-hop, Caleb's favorite, completely drowning out the soft acoustic guitar I'd picked the night before. The laughter got louder. The room filled with stomping feet, clinking glasses, and the sound of Caleb's friends barging in, none of whom I'd ever met. One guy in a backwards baseball cap shouted, "Party's on, bro!" and fired up a Bluetooth speaker, bass shaking the walls like it was a graduation bash. I stood there, still holding my lukewarm chamomile tea, the mom-to-be sash slipping off my shoulder. No one turned to ask how I felt. No one mentioned the baby. The gifts were shoved into a corner, the Emma banner hidden behind a hand-drawn sign, "Congrats, Caleb, Princeton." A bottle of soda, carelessly opened, spilled across the table, running dangerously close to the cake. I grabbed some napkins and bent down to clean it. My knees throbbed from kneeling, my belly pressing against my cotton dress. As I wiped up the sticky frosting smears on the hardwood floor, a blonde girl brushed past me like I was an old decoration. She didn't say excuse me. I heard Caleb's booming voice from behind, talking about campus tours and dream dorms. I kept cleaning. No one stopped. No one saw me. Everything revolved around one person, just like always. I was used to that. But this time was different. I forced myself to stand, back aching, hands sticky with frosting and soda. I looked around the crowded room, full of people who weren't really there for me. My mother was telling a dramatic story about how she'd sacrificed so much to help Caleb reach his Ivy League dream. My father nodded, like he'd personally raised a genius. No one mentioned the person about to give birth. No one noticed me walking out of the noise, clutching my belly. I went into the kitchen, washed my hands, then quietly climbed the stairs. The music kept thumping downstairs, the cheers drifting up like echoes from another world. But in my head, one thought remained. This time, they crossed the line, and I wasn't going to let it slide like I had before. I sat on the bed, legs stretched out, back propped against a pile of pillows, hands cradling my belly like a silent shield. The laughter rising from the living room felt like dull blades scraping against my chest. Downstairs, the party for Caleb's Princeton acceptance was in full swing. In the house I bought, with money earned from sleepless nights, packing orders, handling returns, and making it through low sale months, they celebrated a success that wasn't mine. And honestly, it never was, at least not to them. I slowly closed my eyes, trying not to cry. But the memories didn't need permission to return. I remembered being 11 and my favorite purple princess dress being shredded by school scissors. Caleb was 9 then. When asked, he just shrugged and said, "I didn't take care of it." My mother waved it off, told me not to be dramatic. It was just a piece of fabric and I needed to learn to let things go. Caleb got taken out for ice cream right after. "To forget the fuss," she said. When I was in 8th grade, I was selected to attend a gifted science program at the local university. I brought the invitation home, excited to show my dad. He skimmed it, then asked one question. "Does it cost money?" I nodded. He shook his head and told me to focus on more practical things. 2 years later, when Caleb got accepted into a robotics summer camp, my dad didn't hesitate. He pulled out a check right away. "It's an investment in the future," he said. I lost count of how many times I did chores alone while Caleb played video games all afternoon. I used to think if I worked hard enough, I'd be recognized, but no. When I cleaned the whole house, my mom said, "That's what girls are supposed to do." When Caleb remembered to water the plants once, she praised him for being thoughtful about nature. Then, when I was 19, I decided not to go to college. Not because I didn't want to, but because no one supported me. I once mentioned studying graphic design, but my mom shook her head. "Drawing won't feed anyone," she said. "You should get a stable job." So I applied at a print shop and spent my evenings building an online store selling handmade decor. I did everything myself, learned product photography, SEO, customer service. No one asked if I was tired. When the store started bringing in steady income, I saved enough to put a down payment on this little house, the one I live in now. The one they moved into without asking after I gave them a tour to show off what I'd accomplished. I remember my mom's face so clearly. First surprise, then tears, then a soft whisper. "So the whole family finally has a home." No one asked if I wanted to share. They just brought their things in, rearranged the furniture, and called it our house. Caleb, then a 10th grader, already had a brand new MacBook my parents bought him. I was still using an old laptop I salvaged from a repair shop. I once paid to fix Caleb's car after he dented the back door on the way to tutoring because my mom said, "He's still young, it was just an accident." I still remember going to my first trimester ultrasound alone, driving nearly an hour to the clinic. When I told my mom I was pregnant, she was silent for a moment and then asked, "Does the baby's father know?" No congratulations, no hug. That night, they brought it up at dinner. Caleb laughed and said, "Wow, guess I'm gonna have to share the Wi-Fi with a baby now." Every time I think about these things, I ask myself why I kept giving. Maybe I hoped they'd notice, that they'd change, that they'd love me the way I kept trying to love them, despite everything. But there's one thing I don't hope for anymore. I bent down, opened my nightstand drawer, and took out a gray folder. Inside were the house deed, utility bills in my name, and a file I'd been quietly preparing for weeks. Bold, clear words. Undeniable. I ran my fingers over the first page, feeling like I was touching something sacred. Proof that I hadn't imagined the unfairness. I didn't want to cry anymore. I just wanted to reclaim my space. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise, I was already up. The house still carried the sticky smell of spilled soda and melted frosting from yesterday's party. I stood in the kitchen, holding a warm cup of peppermint tea, feeling nothing but stillness. In the breeze coming through the window, I could hear Caleb's steady snoring from his room and the creaking of the wooden chair in the living room, where my dad usually sat each morning with his lukewarm coffee. I wasn't hesitating anymore. I pulled 3 white envelopes from the kitchen drawer. Each one was sealed, labeled clearly Diana, my mom, Mark, my dad, and Caleb. Inside was a copy of a 30-day notice to vacate the premises, along with a property deed showing I was the sole legal owner. I placed them neatly on the dining table, The same one where they always left dirty dishes for me to clean. Among the leftover mess from the party, the 3 white envelopes stood out like slashes across velvet. I didn't wait long. At exactly 7:15, my mom walked into the kitchen, her hair still messy, holding a mug of soy milk. She yawned, her eyes scanning the table, then stopping. "What's this?" she said, still groggy, but I heard the edge in her voice. She picked up an envelope and tore it open right there. After just a few lines, her eyes widened. Her mug tilted slightly, almost spilling. "Olsen," she called out, louder now. "This has to be some kind of joke, right?" I stepped into the room from the hallway, calm and steady. "It's not," I said. "I've already sent the official letter. These are just copies for the family." She looked at me like I'd just announced I was selling the house to strangers. "Move out? How could you write something like this? This is our home." "No, Mom," I said, looking her in the eye. "This is my home. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. I cover the utilities, the internet, even the plumbing repair you called an outrageous couple hundred a few weeks ago. It's all me." My dad came in from the living room, still groggy but frowning now as he looked at the papers on the table. He grabbed one, skimmed it, then turned to me. "What kind of stunt is this? You're pregnant, and now you want to cause stress in the house?" "It's because I'm pregnant that I can't keep living like this," I said, placing a hand on my belly. "I don't want my daughter growing up in a house where her mother is ignored and walked over every day." Caleb finally wandered in, hair a mess, headphones still around his neck. He looked around and asked sleepily, "What's going on? Why is it so loud?" "She's kicking us out of the house," my mom hissed, her voice sharp like metal scraping glass. Caleb looked at me like I was some villain in a movie. "Are you serious? Just because I got into Princeton yesterday? That was no big deal." I let out a dry laugh. "It's not just because of yesterday. It's because of every day before that. Every time you got favored and I was told, 'You're the girl, you should be more understanding.' Every time I achieved something and Mom said, 'Don't brag too much.' When I got pregnant, everyone acted like nothing happened. But when you got that acceptance letter, the whole world stopped spinning for you." My dad tried to smooth things over. "Come on, Allison, everyone says things they don't mean. Don't blow this out of..." "You're calling the years I spent being treated like a maid blowing things out of proportion?" I cut him off. "I paid for this roof, but Mom told the neighbors the whole family built this together. Caleb wrecked his car, I paid to fix it, and Mom scolded me for bringing it up too much. No one ever asked if I needed help, if I was tired, if I was okay. And then when I threw a party for myself, the whole family turned it into someone else's stage." No one said anything for a long time. No one could argue. I looked at my mom, now trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm not doing this out of hate. I'm doing it out of love, for myself, and because I refuse to let Emma grow up in a family where everything comes at the cost of silence and self-sacrifice." Caleb took a step back. "So where are we supposed to sleep? At a hotel or something?" "I've planned it," I said. "I have a list of short-term rentals, movers if needed. One of my friends even offered to help pack. You have 30 days. My mom stared at me like she had no idea who I was. Maybe she never really did. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving behind stunned faces. Each step I took was a reminder of something they couldn't undo. This time, I wasn't backing down. This time, I chose myself. In the days that followed, the house felt like water stretched tight before a storm. No one said anything direct, but every slam door, every side glance, every heavy step in the hallway sent the same message. They weren't leaving without a fight. My mom started her emotional campaign the way she always did. She called Aunt Hannah, the only relative in Arizona I still talked to, and tearfully told her I was kicking my parents out while pregnant. A day later, I got a long message from Aunt Hannah. "Sweetheart, no matter how upset you are, don't let your daughter grow up without her grandparents. Family is forever." Alice's eyes were truly red. My dad took a different route. He suddenly started doing chores, things he hadn't done in all 24 years I lived with him. He wiped counters, took out the trash, even tried chatting with me in the mornings. "Did you sleep okay?" But I knew exactly what that was. Not guilt. Strategy. A way to soften me, to pull me back into the dutiful daughter role they had always assigned me. Caleb didn't bother hiding his hostility. He started blasting music in his room, slamming doors every time he walked past me, and didn't hold back with snide remarks at dinner. One night, as I was arranging flowers on the table, he walked by and muttered, "Not sure how you plan to raise a kid when no one's around to help wash the dishes." I didn't respond. I just quietly tucked another sprig of lavender into the vase. Then things went beyond what any family should tolerate. One Tuesday morning, I received an email from a major supplier, someone I was negotiating with for a potential partnership next quarter. They said they'd heard some things from a relative about me showing signs of emotional instability and possibly being unfit to manage operations after giving birth. I sat frozen in my office, staring at the flickering screen, then exhaled slowly. I knew exactly who was behind it. I printed the email and filed it into the gray folder, the one where I kept all legal documents. I'd hired a lawyer the week before. She was a friend of an old friend, well-versed in legal eviction processes in Oregon, and not swayed by pleas like, "But they're your biological parents." But I didn't get angry. I didn't call to confront anyone. I just forwarded the scanned email to my attorney, along with the records I'd been collecting: utility bills, home repair receipts, the mortgage agreement, even photos of the house when I moved in. Completely empty before they arrived. On day 17, my mom started crying loudly every evening. She didn't talk to me directly, just made dramatic laments in the living room about sleepless nights worrying about Allison, about thankless sacrifices, and the nights she stayed up when I was sick as a child. I walked past, noise-canceling headphones on, and kept updating the baby registry on my laptop. On day 21, Caleb tried playing the responsibility card. He sat across from me in the kitchen, for the first time since getting the notice. "If you kick us out, I'll have nowhere to study," he said, voice trembling. "I could lose my scholarship. I might not even get to go to Princeton." I looked at him, not angry, not sympathetic. I know how that feels. I didn't have anyone supporting me when I wanted to go to college either. And you know what? I still made it. On day 24, they stopped talking altogether. No more crying, no more guilt tripping, just a heavy silence, thick like fog. The kind that doesn't lead to reconciliation, only quiet preparation for the inevitable. I kept everything going as usual: work, rest, prenatal checkups. My best friend Clarissa came over a few times to help set up the baby's room. We played soft music, chatted about baby names, and picked out a few wall decorations. I tried to build a small world for my daughter, one where no one could take away my role as her mother. Day 30 arrived on a calm, sunny morning. I woke up early, not out of worry, but because my body had grown used to the peace of not being interrupted. They packed in silence. My mom walked the hallway with a stiff expression. My dad said nothing as he dragged suitcases down the stairs. Caleb, the last to leave, stood in the doorway with his backpack slung over one shoulder, staring at me. "You'll regret this," he said, voice dry. "No one's gonna stand by you forever." I just nodded. And I don't need anyone standing beside me to be myself. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in years, the house felt bigger, brighter. Not just because the furniture was gone, but because the heaviness had left with them. It's been over a year since that door shut behind them, and my little house has finally learned how to breathe again. Every morning I make coffee in a kitchen that's no longer cluttered with dirty mugs or misplaced dish rags. Every night I rock Emma to sleep in a room glowing with soft light, her name hand-stitched and hanging on the wall, not hidden behind a "Congrats Caleb" banner or anyone else's shadow. Emma is a calm but fierce little girl, with my eyes and the same dimpled cheeks my dad used to have. Every time I look at her, I know I made the right choice. Not because of what I avoided, but because of what I've built. A real home. My business is steady. After giving birth, I took a month off and returned gradually, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I've hired a delivery assistant and a part-time order manager. My small online shop is now listed among the city's trusted local businesses. I'm not chasing flashiness, but it's enough to keep me from worrying about bills anymore. As for my old family, news still trickles in the way it always has, through distant relatives who don't really care about me but love to gossip. I heard Caleb dropped out after his first semester at Princeton. Not because of grades, but because he couldn't handle living on his own. He wasn't used to cooking, doing laundry, managing his own schedule, or handling anything I used to silently take care of. While his classmates were applying for internships, Caleb was still struggling to build a timetable that didn't have overlapping classes. I didn't feel vindicated, but I wasn't surprised either. After leaving my house, my parents moved in with my uncle in Salem. According to a cousin on my dad's side, they were given a small room and asked to get back on their feet. But within 6 months, tension erupted. My mom complained that the kitchen wasn't clean enough, while my dad refused to chip in for the electric bill, citing financial hardship. In the end, my uncle, once incredibly generous, asked them to leave. Since then, they've bounced around, sometimes in cheap motels, sometimes crashing with acquaintances, but nowhere lasted long. They never contacted me again, and I didn't try to reconnect either. Sometimes I still think about them, not with bitterness, but as a clear reminder, not every blood tie comes with real love. I gave them countless chances. I kept quiet, kept giving, sacrificed even the smallest things, hoping to be seen, to be acknowledged. But that recognition never came. Only growing entitlement and ingratitude. I don't regret letting them go. In fact, it was the first time I chose myself without asking for permission. One early autumn afternoon, with the leaves turning on the trees out front, I pushed Emma's stroller to the park near our neighborhood. She loved the rustling leaves, watching squirrels dart past, and would giggle every time I whistled at the sparrows. People say time heals all wounds. I don't fully believe that. What healed me wasn't time, it was action. It was standing up, clearing out the toxic space around me, and saying enough, even when my voice shook. Emma is growing up in a kind of gentleness I never had. She'll learn that love doesn't come from silence or submission, that a woman doesn't need to carry an entire family to be worthy of affection, and that sometimes strength doesn't mean powering through. It means knowing when to let go. One day, while putting away her toys, I opened an old storage box and found a few baby shower cards from last year. Some messy handwriting, a few generic wishes, and a handful of gifts I couldn't even remember who gave. I thought about throwing them away, but instead I placed them back in the box. Not because I missed them, but because I wanted to remember that I had once hit rock bottom and climbed out on my own. No one lifted me. I walked, one step at a time. From Allison's story, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiveness. It's letting go. Not every relationship is worth keeping, even when it's bound by blood. When you choose yourself, you're not being selfish. You're saving your own life. Allison didn't just reclaim her home, she reclaimed her worth. She proved that peace doesn't come from enduring in silence, but from setting clear boundaries and believing in yourself. What do you think about Allison's decision? Did she do the right thing by setting boundaries with her own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and finding your voice. My name is Mary, and this is the story of the day I realized I had never truly belonged in my own family. I came to my sister's wedding, Ellie's, with a simple intention: to celebrate, smile for a few photos, and play the role of the kind older sister like I always had. The wedding was held at a lakeside resort in Vermont, known for its flower-filled gardens and lavish banquet halls with soaring glass ceilings. As soon as my car stopped at the main gate, a staff member in a black suit stepped out to open the door. I took a deep breath, smoothed the wine-colored dress, the only one I felt suited the fancy event, and smiled as I walked in. I wasn't trying to draw attention or make the day about me. This was Ellie's day, and I had long accepted that I wasn't the favored child. But what I didn't expect was just how cold they could be. As soon as I stepped into the main hall, a receptionist greeted me with a dazzling smile. "Your name?" "Mary Evans," I said softly. Her smile faltered for a moment. I saw the hesitation on her perfectly made-up face. Her hand flipped through the list a little faster than usual, then stopped. Her eyes narrowed slightly before she looked up. "Ah, here it is. You're placed in the hallway area." I blinked. "Sorry, where?" "Just outside the banquet hall near the coat check area," she said, trying to sound casual. I glanced at the seating chart beside us. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, were seated at the head table. Ellie's close friends and her husband's co-workers all had spots inside, under the sparkling chandeliers. And me? I didn't see my name anywhere. "Maybe there's been a mistake," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. She smiled again, this time more awkwardly. "I'm afraid not. This is the assigned spot." My chest burned. I told myself maybe the hall had run out of space. Maybe it was a last-minute error. But then I saw my mother, standing next to Ellie, adjusting the veil on her wedding dress. They were laughing, clinging to each other as if nothing at all was wrong. I walked over and kept my voice steady. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second?" My mother, Caroline, didn't even look at me. "Not now, Mary. Can't you see we're busy?" I bit my lip. "Just a minute." She groaned, clearly annoyed, but stepped aside. Ellie remained still, her eyes locked on me with a smile that could hardly be called warm. "I've been seated. In the hallway," I said. My mother shrugged, as if that was hardly worth mentioning. "We had to prioritize close family, you know that." I clenched my fists. "I am close family." She let out a soft, icy laugh. "Oh, don't make a big deal out of this, Mary." Ellie chimed in, eyes glinting with satisfaction. "I'm sure it was just a mix-up. Nobody meant anything by it. Weddings are hectic." Her voice was sugary sweet, but her look was anything but. I turned to my mother again, hoping for even a flicker of hesitation, but she just sighed. "Don't ruin your sister's big day, Mary. You should be grateful you were invited." The word grateful stuck in my throat like a stone. Grateful to be treated like an outsider in my own family? Grateful to be seated next to the coat rack? Before I could respond, my father, Charles, walked up, his voice low, like he just wanted the moment to pass. "It's just a seat, sweetheart. Don't make it a thing." I stood still. The anger was there, simmering, quiet, not explosive, just something deeper, colder. I smiled, an empty one, and turned away without another word. They thought I'd silently take it, like always, but this time, I wouldn't. I walked slowly out of the main hall, my heels clicking lightly against the cold marble floor. The air in the hallway smelled of silk, wedding flowers, and something else. Something out of place, like me. In my hand was the place card with my name. Mary Evans, Table H, Hallway Area. The elegant cursive felt like a slap in the face. I turned the card in my fingers, my palm damp. I had hoped, just this once, that my family would see me as one of them. But clearly, they never had. A soft click came from behind. The door to the hall opened. "Mary," Ellie's voice called, light like a greeting, but enough to stop me. I turned. She stood there, arms crossed, her veil fluttering in the cool air, her makeup flawless, her smile anything but kind. "Are you upset?" she asked, with no real concern. "Because of the seating?" I gave a dry laugh. "I'm not upset. I'm disappointed." Ellie tilted her head, her eyes lighting up like she'd just heard something funny. "You're always so sensitive. It's just a seat, Mary. Who even cares?" I bit the inside of my cheek, keeping my voice steady. "You know it's not about the seat. It's about how this family treats me. It's always been that way." She shrugged. "So what? You still showed up, still wore the pretty dress, still hoped for attention." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only I could hear. "You're desperate for their approval. It's sad." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Ellie. What's sad is that you need to tear someone down, just to feel loved." That made her pause for a second, but then, as if it meant nothing, Ellie laughed. "You really know how to kill the mood, like always." Footsteps approached behind her. It was Mom. Caroline, with a tense expression, like she'd been dragged away from the party to handle something trivial. "I heard there's some drama out here," she asked, eyes on Ellie, barely glancing at me. I took a breath, telling myself I deserved an explanation. "Mom, I was seated in the hallway. I'm not some acquaintance or a distant guest. I'm your daughter." She furrowed her brow, then gave a tight smile. "Mary, it's not that I don't value you. It's just, there were limited seats inside. I had to prioritize people who are closer." I stood still. "What did you just say?" "Closer to Ellie," she said quickly. "Aunt Patty, her best friend from college, the people who were there when she was sick. You've always been independent. I never had to worry about you." I let out a laugh, so soft it surprised even me. "You never had to worry about me, and you think that justifies treating me like I don't exist?" Ellie jumped in, her voice syrupy. "Mary, stop it. Mom didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. You should be grateful you were even invited." That line cut deep. I turned to Mom, looking at her like I was seeing her for the first time. "Do you even realize how grateful sounds when you've made me feel like a stranger in my own family?" She said nothing. No touch, no hug, no apology. A deep voice came from my left. "It's just a seat, Mary." It was my father, Gregory. He stood there with a glass in his hand, eyes fixed on the floor. Still the same avoidance, like always. I turned to him, speaking slowly. "I don't need you to defend me, but the least you could do is look me in the eye when you speak." He looked up, confusion flickering briefly before fading. Ellie shrugged, like I was a stubborn child ruining the adults' party. "If you're that unhappy, you can just leave." I looked at the three of them, these people I once called family, and suddenly realized maybe Ellie was right. I tightened my grip on my purse and took a deep breath. Something inside me cracked, not from weakness, but from clarity. If they had decided I didn't belong, then I wouldn't try anymore. And what was about to happen would make sure they never forgot this night. I walked quickly down the thick carpeted hall, my heels swallowed by the plush silence. Behind me, the music in the banquet hall played on cheerfully, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. But it all sounded like it came from another world, a world I was never really invited into. I stopped at a quiet corner, clutching my purse strap like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Ellie's smirk, Mom's dismissive shake of the head, Dad's distant silence. All of it swirled in my mind like a broken melody. And then a memory returned, sharp and clear like it happened yesterday. 3 years ago, I went home for Thanksgiving, the rare occasion when Ellie wasn't around, off traveling with a new boyfriend in Portugal. The house in Albany felt strangely calm. No loud chatter, no trace of Ellie's overpowering perfume lingering in the air. Mom asked me to go to my old room to find some family photos for a memory album. I nodded, a little relieved to do something that felt meaningful, or at least included. My room hadn't changed after all those years. The small bed by the window, the old bookshelf, and the high school photos, mostly of me, alone. I rummaged through the drawer and found the photo box, but then my eyes accidentally landed on the small drawer of my mother's vanity. I didn't know why, but I opened it. Inside lay a light brown leather notebook, resting silently. Every page was filled with my mother's handwriting, crowned, careful letters. I flipped it open, not thinking much, until I read the first lines. The first day Ellie went to kindergarten, she didn't cry. She turned around, waved goodbye to me, and ran into class like a brave little doll. I turned the page. Ellie loves the baked pasta I make on Thursday nights. Ellie used to be scared of thunder, but now she's much braver. Ellie's favorite birthday gift was the little nurse outfit I got her when she turned 8. Page after page, year after year, it was Ellie. Always Ellie. Memories recorded like a private memoir just for her. I began searching, like I was trying to prove to myself that I too had once been remembered. I flipped each page, scanned every line, but there was nothing. Not a sentence, not a line, not even the name, Mary. I clutched the notebook so tightly my knuckles turned white. When Mom walked in, I was still sitting motionless on the floor, the notebook wide open in my hands. "You wrote all of this about Ellie?" I asked, my voice small but cold. She glanced at the notebook and smiled, light as if it meant nothing. "I had to remember everything so Ellie wouldn't feel forgotten. She's sensitive." I bit my lip until it bled. "And what about me?" Mom looked at me, her eyes unwavering. "You've always been independent. You didn't need to be written about to be remembered." I nodded, saying nothing more, but something inside me shattered in that moment. A part of my childhood, a part of my hope, and the part of me that longed for my mother's recognition. That memory came back so vividly in the luxurious hallway of today's wedding. Nothing had changed. I was still Mary, the daughter my mother never thought to include in her memory book, and didn't think needed a decent seat at her sister's wedding. A chill ran down my spine, not from the air conditioning, but from the clarity. I sank onto the bench by the window, right next to the coat rack, exactly where they'd planned for me to be. I looked at the name card in my hand, printed in gold script, then at my own faint reflection in the glass. Behind me, the wedding went on. Glimmering lights, white flowers, Ellie's dazzling smile, and her expensive dress. But I sat here, on the edge of memory, space, and affection. If this was where they thought I belonged, maybe they'd never truly known me at all. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad about that. I just felt like I was finally stepping out of the shadows they'd cast over me for so many years, and I was ready to face all of it. I stayed still on that bench by the glass, my heart tangled between memories and the present. Everything that had just happened, the way Ellie mocked me, how Mom brushed off my feelings like they didn't matter, kept playing over and over in my head like a loop with no end. "Mary," a low male voice startled me. I looked up. Standing in front of me was Ethan Bennett, the groom of the day. He wore a tailored tux, his tie slightly loosened, his dark brown hair tousled as if he'd run his hands through it from stress. In his hand was a champagne flute, untouched. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and nodded slightly. "Ethan." He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly like he was trying to figure something out. "Seeing you sitting here doesn't feel like you." I let out a soft laugh. "Really? Because your family decided I'm not worthy of a seat in the main hall?" He said nothing. A heavy silence settled between two people who barely knew each other, yet were sharing a strangely intimate moment. "Mary," Ethan finally said, his voice lower, "can I ask you something?" I met his gaze. "Go ahead." He hesitated, his hand tightening slightly around the stem of the glass. "Has Ellie ever said anything about me that seemed off to you?" I tilted my head. "Are you asking if I've heard her badmouth you?" "Not just that." He pulled his phone from his inner jacket pocket, looked down at the screen, then shook his head. "It's just, lately she's been different, controlling, secretive. There are things she doesn't want me to know, and I'm starting to realize something's not right." I paused. Ellie's harsh words during family gatherings still echoed in my mind, but I had never told anyone, partly because I didn't want to cause trouble, partly because I was so used to being dismissed. But something in Ethan's eyes made it impossible for me to stay silent this time. "You might want to brace yourself," I said slowly, "because I don't think you really know who Ellie is." He opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut in, soft yet strangely powerful. And if you're still unsure, then maybe your mother can help make things clear. We both turned. Celeste Bennett, Ethan's mother, stood at the end of the hallway, holding a phone, her eyes locked on her son. She was the kind of woman who made a room pause when she entered. Not because she was loud, but because her presence demanded attention. Today, she wore an elegant navy gown, her platinum hair in a sleek bun, and her eyes sharp enough to see through anything. She walked closer and handed the phone to Ethan. "Look." Ethan took it, his finger swiping across the screen. First, a furrowed brow, then a stunned expression. I saw his hand tremble slightly as he scrolled. I couldn't see the messages, but his expression changed. From confusion to anger, then to something deeper, broken. Ethan's voice cracked. She told her best friend she was training me to be the perfect husband, said I was too predictable, and as long as she stayed sweet in front of you, this house would be hers. Celeste nodded. There are also messages to her stylist. Ellie said that a few months after the wedding, she'd find a way to make you dependent. And then, everything will be mine. That's a direct quote. I looked at Ethan. His face had gone pale, his shoulders tense, like he was bracing against an invisible weight. "I can't believe this," he whispered. "Mom, why do you have these messages?" Celeste glanced at me, then answered, "A friend of mine works at the studio Ellie hired her stylist from. They accidentally sent the backup file to my email when I rescheduled a fitting, and I read it." Ethan sank into a chair, still gripping the phone. The air around us felt frozen. I sat beside him, saying nothing. Part of me hurt for him, but another part knew this was the moment when buried truths finally came to light. Celeste stood there, silent for a few seconds, then said gently, "Mary, thank you for not turning away." I gave a small nod. I didn't need thanks, I just wanted the truth, not to stay buried. And from here on out, I knew this wedding would no longer go the way they had planned, and Ellie would no longer control everything the way she thought she could. The air in the private conference room on the resort's second floor felt heavy. No one spoke when the door closed behind us. Only the hum of the AC and the faint breeze slipping through a slightly open window. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his eyes blank. Celeste stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder like the only anchor left. I sat slightly to the right, hands in my lap, trying to stay composed even though my heart pounded so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. The door opened again. Ellie walked in with my mother, Caroline. Mom looked confused, but Ellie didn't. She held on to her usual air of confidence, only now there was a flicker of caution in her eyes. And worry. "What's going on here?" Ellie asked, her voice slightly high-pitched as if she was trying to regain control. "Why are you all pulling people out of the wedding?" Ethan stood up, and the look in his eyes was no longer shock. It was a cold, clear resolve. He pulled a white envelope from the pocket of his suit jacket and placed it firmly on the table. "You know what this is?" Ellie stared at the envelope, saying nothing. "Petition to annul the marriage," he said, his voice unwavering. "And, in case you care, I've already signed it." The room fell silent. My mother gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Ellie stepped back, her lips pressed tightly together. "You are joking, right?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Celeste spoke up, her tone sharp as a blade. "We read all of your messages, Ellie. Every word you said about Ethan, about me, about this family. There's no denying any of it." I did. "Don't." Ethan cut her off, and for the first time, his voice carried both hurt and fury. "You called my mother a rich old woman who only knows how to write checks. You told your friend you'd have it all under control 6 months after the wedding. You called me too easy to manipulate. Just pretend to be fragile and you get anything you want." "Want me to quote more?" Ellie froze. I looked at my mom. She stood still, her face pale as if she was seeing her daughter's true self for the first time. "Those were jokes," Ellie said, her voice hoarse. "Messages between friends. Not serious. Celeste gave a short, bitter laugh. And what about the divorce consultation you filed last month? Was that a joke too? That's when I saw my father, Robert, enter the room, his expression heavy. I didn't know who had called him, but his presence seemed to make the room sink deeper into tense silence. Is this true? He asked, looking straight at Ellie. Ellie didn't respond. Robert turned to my mother. Did you know about this? Mom shook her head weakly. I didn't think Ellie could do something like this. You never think, he said slowly. You've never looked at what's really going on. Then he turned toward me, and for the first time in many years, he didn't avoid my eyes. Mary, he said, I'm sorry. Both Mom and I were stunned. I had never heard him say sorry, especially not to me. I've been silent for too long. Let everything veer off course, he went on. And I know you were right about Ellie. About everything. I didn't know how to react. Part of me had grown so used to being overlooked that this recognition left me breathless. Ellie snapped out of it. You're taking her side? She shouted, voice rising. Your daughter, the one you've always loved, is being turned on by her entire family over a few dumb texts? Ethan gripped the edge of the table. Don't call them dumb texts, Ellie. That's who you really are. You don't understand, Ellie shouted, her voice trembling. I love you. I just didn't want to lose the chance to build a stable life. What's wrong with that? Celeste raised an eyebrow. Is that what love looks like? Planning a divorce before the wedding even starts? She's lying, Ellie spun toward me, her eyes burning. This is all your fault. If you weren't so jealous, if you didn't poison Mom against me, today wouldn't be ruined. I took a deep breath, staying calm. Ellie, you did this to yourself. Don't blame anyone else. You've always been the outsider in this family, Ellie screamed. Always pretending to be the good one, just to make Mom feel guilty. What do you want? To steal everything from me? No, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I just want the truth to be seen. My mother stepped forward then. She looked at Ellie for a long time, confused, hurt, and finally, broken. Ellie, she said softly, I can't defend you anymore. Ellie stood frozen. Her lips moved like she wanted to say something, but no words could fix anything now. She turned toward me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her. Not fear of being caught. Fear because she realized no one was standing by her this time. Ellie stood there in the dead quiet room, breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The carefully applied makeup from the morning was now smudged around her eyes. The pristine white wedding gown that had wowed everyone just hours ago now looked tight, burdensome, stripped of the elegance she had imagined for her big day. She whipped her head toward me, her eyes darkening. You always wanted to take me down, Ellie hissed, her voice cracking. You never let me have one peaceful moment, did you? I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. But Ellie didn't need a reply. She charged toward me, eyes blazing, her footsteps echoing against the glossy tile floor. I didn't move. I wasn't afraid. And then, in that exact moment, a steady arm slid between us. It was Celeste. That's enough, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp as steel. Ellie froze, stunned. Get out of my way! You've caused enough chaos, Celeste replied firmly. If I let you do one more foolish thing, that would be on me. Ellie panted, eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape, or someone still on her side. But no one spoke. No one stepped forward. Ethan leaned against the table, expression unreadable. My father had his head bowed, brow furrowed like he'd just accepted a bitter truth. And my mother, the one who once excused every little mistake Ellie made, stood frozen, clutching her purse strap, eyes rimmed with red. Then, Ellie pushed past Celeste, heels clattering against the floor as she stormed out of the room. her long train sweeping behind her through the hallway. I thought she would vanish behind the door, but no. She shoved open the main doors leading back to the reception hall, where soft music still played, where hundreds of guests were laughing, clinking glasses, and posing for photos against a backdrop of pristine white flowers. And when Ellie appeared, breath ragged, hair disheveled, eyes wild, everything stopped. The music faded. Heads turned. A murmur rose. Curious, stunned, then shocked. Stares. The rest of us from the conference room followed behind her. No one tried to stop her. No one wanted to. Ellie stood at the center of the reception hall. What was supposed to be the most beautiful moment of her life, now becoming the stage for the downfall of a self-crowned queen. "You think you can humiliate me like this?" Ellie screamed, her voice echoing through the rows of banquet tables and shimmering chandeliers. "I gave everything for today. Months of planning, picking out every single detail, and now, over a few messages, a few meaningless words, you're going to destroy me?" No one answered. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze steady and unblinking. "No one destroyed you, Ellie. You did that yourself." She shook her head wildly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You love me, Ethan. I did everything for our future." Celeste stepped forward, slow but deliberate. She faced Ellie, her voice chillingly calm. "I once hoped you'd be part of this family, but you never wanted to be a Bennett. You only wanted what we had." A quiet "oh" rippled through the crowd like a wave. People were beginning to understand. Some guests exchanged glances, a few set their glasses down, their eyes heavy with realization. Ellie glanced around, breath uneven. "She made all of this up," she shouted, pointing directly at me. "Mary's always been jealous of me, always trying to drag me down. She spent her whole life in the background, and now she wants to pull me down with her." I stepped forward, calm and steady, my voice just loud enough to be heard. "I don't need to drag anyone down. The truth carries its own weight." Ellie went silent. The tension was tight as wire. All eyes were on her, even those who had once cheered her on, admired her, now just stood there, in silence. I turned to Ethan, clinging to a final shred of hope. You can't leave me. I'm your wife. We made vows." Ethan pulled the same white envelope from his jacket pocket, the one he'd come prepared with. He held it up in front of Ellie. "This is the annulment contract," he said slowly, his voice calm and cold. And I signed it. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Celeste gently placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "Let's go, Ethan." As they turned and walked away, Ellie stood alone, surrounded by chandeliers and glittering gowns. She had once been the center, the star, built on control and appearances. Now it had all crumbled, right in front of everyone. A week after Ellie's wedding, I woke up in my small Boston apartment. No wedding flowers, no distant violin music, no judgmental looks or whispered side comments. Just me and silence. My phone buzzed gently on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. Mom. The 9th call in 3 days. I didn't answer. I'd heard enough in that conference room, in that reception hall, and throughout a lifetime of quiet endurance. I didn't need a half-hearted apology or a performative hug. I didn't need them to keep acting out a picture-perfect family just to save face. That afternoon, as I was making coffee, a text came through. From Mom. "I know you're angry. I can't change the past. But I want to see you. Have dinner with me? Just the two of us?" I stared at the message for a long time. The old me, the me from a few years ago, would have said yes immediately. I would have picked out a nice dress, arrived on time, smiled politely, and tried to think of light conversation topics to keep the mood afloat. I would have hoped, however faintly, to hear her say, "I'm proud of you," or simply say my name with genuine warmth. But that girl didn't exist anymore. I put the phone down. No reply. No anger. Just no longer necessary. That evening, I walked along the Charles River, where small lights hung from the railings reflected across the still water. The crisp early autumn air carried the scent of the breeze and soft laughter from passing strangers. I sat on a stone bench and pulled out an old photo from my wallet, a family picture from Christmas when I was 16. Ellie was in the middle, wearing a bright red dress, grinning ear to ear. Mom sat beside her, hand resting proudly on Ellie's shoulder. Me? I stood off to the side, half hidden behind the Christmas tree. I stared at the photo for a long time, then gently folded it and tucked it back into my bag. I no longer needed to force myself into a frame I was never meant to fit in. Another call came through. This time it was my father, Robert. I picked up. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew he wouldn't call unless it mattered. "Mary," he said, his voice rougher and slower than usual. "I'm not good with words, you know that." I didn't answer. I just listened. "But that day, when you spoke, and your mother saw who Ellie really was, I think, for the first time in her life, she understood how alone you've been." A long pause followed. "Whether you forgive us or not, I just want you to know, I was wrong. And I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know." I closed my eyes. No tears, no pain, just a quiet sense of peace. "Thank you, Dad," I said softly, "but I don't need an apology anymore. I just need freedom." That night, I went home, pulled out the family photo album from the shelf. I didn't burn it. I'll tear it up. I just placed it in a box, locked it, and set it on top of the wardrobe. An era had ended, and I didn't need to look back. The next morning, I booked a trip to Maine, a trip I'd always wanted to take but never let myself because of family gatherings or other invisible obligations. This time, I chose me. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their validation. And most importantly, I didn't need their love to feel worthy. Because now, I knew. My worth doesn't come from someone else's gaze. It comes from how I see myself. Family might be where we come from, but it's not always where we belong. Real family is made of those who respect you, listen to you, and don't make you fight just to be seen. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not to run, but to find yourself. Mary's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone born under the same roof will give you the love and respect you deserve. Sometimes protecting yourself means letting go of the relationships you once thought were unbreakable. Growth doesn't always come from being accepted. It comes the moment you walk away without needing an apology. In real life, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's an act of courage and freedom. What did you think of Mary's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life family stories.